What's up guys, 80sG here and welcome back to another deck of the day. Today, the deck of the day is Dinosaurs. With the new support that we got from Maze of MILLENNIA, I believe this deck has become 100 times better, much more consistent, much more enjoyable to play, and I really wanted to showcase this deck because I'm absolutely loving playing this deck now with the new releases. So let's get started with our deck profile. Starting off this deck profile, we have the big boys of the deck. We have one copy of Ultimate Conductor Tyranno, as well as one copy of Dino Wrestler Panker Toops. Now, most people would argue that you need to play two copies of Ultimate Conductor Tyranno in the deck, but during testing, I find myself in many situations that I would just have UCT, UCD Lost World, and no feasible way of either triggering the destruction effect of Lost World or getting monsters in the graveyard. So I decided that maybe one copy of Ultimate Conductor Tyranno might be better, and so far he has worked wonders for me. Now about Panker Toops, most likely I would not have chosen to play Panker Toops in the main deck, but the one reason that you want to play Dinosaur Panker Toops is because in case that you can activate your double evolution pill while you have a Lost World up, you can get Dinosaur Panker Toops from the deck, tribute him to target the token to destroy it, trigger the replacement effect of Lost World, and that can kickstart your engine like that. So in case of weaker hands, Panker Toops can really work wonders with just an animated Archosaur. Next up, we have 3 copies of Soul Eating Overraptor. There's nothing really to say about this card. The one thing that I want people to really remember is that Overraptor is one of the most important ways that you can play under Draw in this format. This format is very hand trap heavy, and Draw and Lockbird is absolutely everywhere. So the sending effect is sometimes more important in case that you have enough resources in the graveyard. For example, if you already have a Misk, don't search a monster, send a monster like Tera to the graveyard so you can avoid getting Drawn and Lockbird in case your hand cannot play around it. So that's all I have to say about Ovi. And we do have the one copy of Miscellaneous. Nothing to say about this card. The only thing I want to say is that we really want this card to come back to 2 or 3. This deck would be absolutely amazing with more copies of this, but I understand this card can be really unfair. Next, we have the 2 copies of Animated Archosaur. The reason I am playing 2 Animated Archosaur instead of 1, and I did consider cutting 1, especially since Horned Source allows you to get an additional normal summon, which can help you in case you have many starters in your hand, like Archosaur. But the reason I wanted to play 2 of this is because sometimes drawing the 1 in a hand that cannot produce enough monsters in the graveyard to trigger Misk for other monsters can be very problematic, and you desperately need to get at least 1 destruction during your turn. So I wanted to play 2 Archosaur just in case I draw 1, so I don't brick with that 1 copy in my hand. Next, I do stick to the scrap package of 2 copies of Scrap Raptor, as well as 1 copy of Scrap Chimera. Now, the reason I decided to stick to this engine is because the scraps enable a lot of really powerful plays, especially they enable easy access to Baron, which can be very crucial in certain hands. But also I'm playing a really nice tech in this deck that I believe works wonders with this. Apart from that, Lost World is very powerful, and normal summoning a Raptor and going through the Scrap Chimera and Scrap Wyvern line can both trigger the Lost World as well as get you enough materials for either link summoning into a card like Appaloosa or get you any other resources from the deck in combination with Lost World. And at the very least, Scrap Chimera and Scrap Raptor, even at the weakest of hands, they can equal a rank 4 like Dweller or Baguska, so I do believe that the scraps are a worthwhile inclusion in this deck. Next one, I have 3 copies of Baby Ceratosaurus, as well as 2 copies of Petite Pteranodon. Now, I do believe that number 5 in babies is the proper number. I do not play the diagram version of this deck, despite Horned Source being able to search diagram. I prefer not playing that version. But number 5 is, in my opinion, the best number. Makes it more consistent. Draw multiple of the babies, or at least 1 of the babies in your opening hand, and you always have at least 1 more baby that you can pop through Lost World in future turns. So 5 babies, in my opinion, is the proper number. After that, I'll play the one of Dinosaurs, starting off with the Tera. This card is absolutely phenomenal. This card is everything the deck needed. It is a giant Rex on steroids. When this card is banished, it brings itself back to your side of the field, and if it brings itself back like that, it gets you polymerization. as well as getting your polymerization straight from the deck and allowing you to fusion summon immediately. There's just a lot more plays that this card can do in comparison to Janrex. This is why I decided to replace Janrex with Tera. And this is just an incredible tool that we got from Maze of Millennia. Absolutely amazing card. So definitely a worthwhile inclusion in the deck. Finally, I do play one copy of Zeno Meteorus, as well as the one copy of Frostosaurus. Nothing really much to say about this. The combination of Zeno Meteorus and Frostosaurus is amazing both for fusion summoning into a monster like Dinosaur, getting monsters to your side of the field like Chenging, or simply making a Lars. And this is just amazing cards that enable so many powerful extra deck plays, so definitely worthwhile inclusions. The final monster I decided to play in this deck is 3 copies of Casture of Fenrir. Now, most people would either play 2 copies of Fenrir or put more hand traps in the deck in comparison to Fenrir, but during testing I found that the main problem that I would encounter with this deck is the fact that I did not have enough extension. So, for example, in hands that I either were a little bit weaker, or if I got hand trapped multiple times, I didn't have enough materials to either commit into a cross sheep line or simply put guys on the field that can actually do something. So I believe Fenrir is just one of these cards that going first and second is just insane. It allows you to get a psychic monster that you can trigger with Bill. It can be used for link plays. It can be used for as a really powerful card to either clean boards or protect yourself. And one of the things that I find is that this card is better than Panker Toops because Panker Toops cannot always be useful due to if you decide to go in first. If you're going first, then Panker Toops is complete deadweight in comparison to Fenrir, who is an absolutely much better card. So 3 copies of Fenrir, in my opinion, are absolutely necessary. Moving on to the spell cards, we have 3 copies of Ground Zeno. This card is absolutely amazing, and it is also another reason to play the Scrap Engine, because Ground Zeno can search any dinosaur tuner or any normal dinosaur, and in hands that you already have a monster like Zeno Meteorus, you do not want to go ahead and search Frosto most of the time, and in future turns, Ground Zeno is much more consistent with the Scrap Engine because you always have a Scrap monster that you can search with this, because in other builds, if you use one Ground Zeno and then you go through the line, then you have more dead copies of this card, and I believe playing less means that you're also dropping the ceiling of this deck, so 3 copies with the Scrap Engine, in my opinion, is much better. But one of the most important parts of this card right now is the fusion aspect, because you can use this card from the graveyard as to fusion summon. You do not even have to commit into the Tera search for polymerization. If you get trolled, for example, you can still go for the fusion line through Ground Zeno's graveyard effect. So absolutely phenomenal card, 3 copies, absolutely amazing. After that, we obviously have 3 copies of Fossil Deck. Nothing to say about this. Searches your entire deck besides the biggest boys. Nothing really to add to this. And here's the card I have been talking about and I have been really looking forward to testing more with, is 3 copies of Ready Fusion. So as I said before with Fenrir, the main problem that I encountered with this deck is extension. Sometimes 1 or 2 hand drops were just enough, just completely shut me down and make me unable to play. So I always wanted to find a replacement card for an extra monster that had a proper level and possibly was a dinosaur that could either trigger my Lost World and make it so that my plays weren't just interrupted by a single hand trap. And the card I found was this. This is Brachiosaurus. Brachiosaurus is a vanilla level 6 dinosaur monster that just gets out through Ready Fusion. This makes the deck so much better in my opinion. Not only is it a dinosaur, which means that if you have a Lost World, you can trigger Lost World by activating this, so cards like Effect Failure and Impermanence just completely useless. But it's also that since this is a normal monster, this card on its own can trigger the effect of the replacement effect of Lost World. Meaning that, for example, if you have a Scrap monster, like Scrap Raptor, for example, you can activate your effect of Scrap Raptor, attempting to pop your Brachiosaurus, and that will trigger the replacement effect. Also, Scrap Raptor doesn't actually have to destroy the monster, it just has to attempt to destroy it, so you still get the additional normal summon through the Scrap Raptor's effect. Now, it's also a level 6, which in combination with Scrap Raptor means that you can make a quick and easy Baron. It also means that if you bring this card under Cross Sheep, it can allow you to get a monster from the graveyard. And one of the plays that I really like doing is using Brachiosaurus, make a Cross Sheep, use the effect of Overraptor to pop a monster, and that brings Brachiosaurus back to a zone that Cross Sheep points to, which will also allow me to revive another monster like a baby. So in my opinion, this card has a lot of positives, And it also works with Ground Zeno. For example, if you have a Lost World, this card on the field, and then you activate Ground Zeno, you can search your monster, attempt to pop Brachus, and then that will trigger the effect of Lost World to destroy a monster and kickstart your engine like that. So in my opinion, Brachus is just a very nice inclusion, a very nice extension. So 3 copies of Ready Fusion, in my opinion, are very much worthwhile in this deck. After that, we have 2 copies of Lost World. You don't need to play 3 anymore. Thankfully, we have Wed Source, which can get you Lost World straight from the deck, but it's also not a terrible card to draw. What I found was, if I was playing 3 copies, and I used to play 3 copies with a terraforming, but I would get drolled to my heart's content, and I would also find myself in positions that I would draw multiple Lost Worlds, and maybe not ways to even trigger Lost World. So I'm very happy that Wed Source can just search this card out. Is much, much better in this situation. The final card that I decided to add to the field spells is 1 copy of a Cold Zone. Now, this is a card that was released in Brothers of Legend, and what it does is, when a monster is summoned, while this card is on the field, you get to destroy that monster. It's forceful. You have to destroy that monster, and you replace that monster with a token. Now, this works both ways. Whether you summon the monster or whether your opponent summons a monster, that monster gets destroyed and is replaced by a token. Now, this is for hands that have a lot of babies, so if you can commit to a Hornsaurus line, you can get a Cold Zone, get the additional normal summon of Hornsaurus to pop the baby, bring you a token, which can also be protected in case you want to combine with Raptor and Wyvern. The token can be protected, so you can trigger Lost World protection if you play first a Cold Zone, then Lost World. But it is also a token, therefore it's a normal monster that can be used with any dinosaur to produce a Gigantosaur. So in my opinion, a Cold Zone is a very nice card. It can be in certain matchups very good, both to pop your opponent's cards and as an interruption, but also to unclog your hand if you have way too many babies. So in my opinion, a very much worthwhile inclusion to this deck. After that, we have the 2 copies of Double Evolution Pill. It is just a phenomenal card. It allows you to banish monsters from the graveyard, get out monsters like UCT, which is the big boy, get a monster like Panker Toops that you can use to trigger Lost World in that way, as I said before. So in my opinion, 2 copies of Double Evolution Pill is a worthwhile inclusion. Another card that I was thinking about is the Beta Evolution Pill, but I still haven't found myself experimenting with that version. So at the moment, I'm just playing 2 of the Double Evolution. After that, we have 2 copies of Triple Tactic Talents. This card is specifically to either unclog your hand, but if you get drolled, you just really want to fiend out those hand traps. You just want to get into your opponent's hand, look at it, say, okay, you still have an Ass Blossom, you still have an Impermanence, how do we play around this? This is the main use that I find myself using Triple Talents for. I just want to look at my opponent's hand most of the time and just pick cards apart, but it's also going second, allows you to steal monsters and do a lot of really nice plays. So definitely 2 copies are included. I used to play 3, but then during testing, I'd find myself in this very nasty situation that will draw multiples of it. So 2 copies, in my opinion, is very, very nice. Now, moving on, we just have 3 copies of Pot of Prosperity. In my previous deck profile, I did not have Pot of Prosperity because the card was very expensive at the time. But thankfully, thanks to Rarity Collection, I got my copies and definitely need to play 2 or 3 of this card. Just increases the consistency of this deck so much. Allows you to dig in for whether it's extension, whether it's babies you want, whether it's OV, anything. So this card, absolutely worthwhile inclusion in this deck. And finally, we have 1 copy of Polymerization. This is a part of the engine. You search it with Yugioh Era Tera. And finally, 1 copy of Cold by the Grave. I see people cutting this card and I do not understand why. I believe this card is still a very worthwhile inclusion in this deck. So definitely playing a copy of Cold by. Moving on to the extra deck, we have the new card, Wed Source. This card is absolutely insane. So this card can attack directly, doesn't really matter. But the main effect is that this card, upon fusion summon, it can get you any field spell you want from either deck or graveyard. So if you want your Lost World, you can get Lost World. If you have a lot of babies and you want to play a Cold Zone, you get a Cold Zone directly. You can get them from the graveyard. So in case you can fusion summon this turn after a card, after your field spells have already been removed from your deck, you can always get them from the grave. And it gives you an additional normal summon of any dinosaur monster, which is absolutely phenomenal. Many times you have a lot of starters, but you do not know how to use them or do not know what to do with them. but Horn Source just allows you to get all of these guys out of your hand, and it is just an incredible card. Also, one thing that I want to note about this is that this card requires a Tera as well as a Dinosaur or Dragon. Therefore, if you have already committed into a Scrap line and you have committed into Scrap Wyvern is a Dragon, so you can fusion summon using your Scrap Wyvern to go into Horn Source like that. After that, we play one copy of Brachus. I talked about this card before. This card is really good, in my opinion. It's just a very nice inclusion. You can make Baron, you can make your Lars, you can make pretty much whatever you want. Great consistency and great versatility when it comes to using cards like Scraps or Zeno, Ground Zeno, or Lost. After that, I do play one Carbonal Warrior. Now, admittedly, this card should not be Carbonal Warrior. It should be Rare Fish for the niche situation that you can make a Dweller using this card, and Dweller has an extra 500 attack points. Doesn't really matter, but it's just a level 4 monster that you can use either for an SP Little Knight, or you can use for an Xyz play like Baguska or Dweller. Finally, I have one copy of Yugioh. In my opinion, this card is very powerful. In case you also want to grab resources back. There are many hands that will just want to send a card like a UCT to the graveyard with my Overraptor, and then I will just grab it back using Yugioh by fusing summoning into this. Just a lot of fun and interesting plays that this card enables. Also, if this card is destroyed, it comes back, it brings Frostosaurus back to the deck, so you can use your Zeno Meteorus again. So, in my opinion, this card is a very nice inclusion to this. For the synchros, I only play one copy of Baron the Floor, as well as one copy of Changing. Now, when it comes to Baron, I would honestly not play this card if it wasn't for the Scraps and Brachus. I believe that there's no reason to use your only tuner in that situation, which is Zeno Meteorus, to go into this, because Zeno Meteorus, you want Zeno Meteorus to stick to your field, so you can use its effect to get a Frosto out, go into a Lars. So in my opinion, Baron is much better with the Scraps. And as for Changing, I believe this card is an absolute must in this deck because it has a great combination with UCT. If there's not a lot of monsters you want to put face down, you can always use the effect of Ultimate Conductor Tyranno, triggering the destruction replacement effect of Changing, banishing a card from the graveyard, and triggering Changing's effect that will banish a card from your opponent's field and graveyard. So you either pick between putting all your opponent's monsters face down or banishing cards. This is a great combination. I've used it a lot of times. In my opinion, a very nice card in Dinosaur. Now we're playing my favorite part of the deck. We play the Evolzar package, Lagia, Dolka, and Lars. This card is absolutely phenomenal. It is 2 negates, Dolka is 2 negates, Lagia is 1 negate. Nothing really much to say about these cards. Absolutely wonderful inclusions in this deck. After that, we have one copy of Abyss Dweller. In this format especially, since there's a lot of fireworks going on, there's a lot of decks that rely on the graveyard. In my opinion, Dweller is a phenomenal card and a very good part of the end board. Also, there's many situations that if you are afraid your opponent might have a card like Super Polymerization, it is better to commit into a combination of Dweller plus another Evolzar monster going for multiple monsters, because then you are a Super Polymagnet and you lose your entire field to a single card. So Dweller, absolutely phenomenal. And finally, one copy of Baguska. I was considering either Baguska or Dugaris, but I found Baguska to be a little more reliable, especially since it doesn't falter to cards like Drone and Lockbird, for example. Baguska is just a decent way to stop your opponent just sitting down for a turn and making sure that you do not die or put your opponent in a very hard situation that your opponent cannot kill you. So, Baguska, absolutely phenomenal card. One copy of it is a must. Now for the Link monsters, is play one copy of Link Kuriboh. I do not play Secure Garna. You do not need to play Secure Garna. You can just Link Kuriboh, make a Cross Sheaf, or make a Scrap Wyvern, or make an SP. And you do not need to play Secure Garna. I hate Secure Garna. Just Link Kuriboh is good enough. After that, we have one copy of Cross Sheep. This card is so much better with Ready Fusion. I never made this card before putting Ready Fusion in my deck. Now I consider Cross Sheep to be a phenomenal card that I can use in much better ways, and I'm very happy to be doing so. So definitely a worthwhile inclusion. After that, one copy of Scrap Wyvern. Scrap Wyvern is just a very powerful card. It allows you to destroy cards both from your opponent's field, from your field. It recovers dinosaur monsters, it triggers all your scraps, and it's also a dragon, meaning that you can fuse with your Scrap Wyvern into your Horn Source. A phenomenal inclusion. And the final card is one copy of SP Little Knight. This card is insane, especially if you don't have enough resources to commit into a bigger play. SP Little Knight is a very good part of both the end board and of removing cards from your opponent so that you can make easier plays. A phenomenal card, but if you want to play a less expensive version, definitely go for Appaloosa. Much easier to pick up, much easier to play, but SP is just such a good card. I could not include it in this deck. All in all, I believe Dinosaurs is a very nice deck to play. Droll is everywhere, and it is definitely a hand trap format that can put this deck into a very tough spot. But I just find this deck to be much more consistent, much more enjoyable to play now with the access to Archosaur and kind of Tera. And I believe it is versatile enough to at least be able to compete. And you're definitely going to have a blast using this deck. It is a cool, fun, and interesting deck. And in my opinion, a definite worthwhile consideration for the upcoming format. Thank you guys for watching today's video. If you guys like this deck profile, please make sure to subscribe to Team ATCG. Make sure to follow us, to hit the notification bell, and we cannot wait to see you guys on the next deck of the day. See you later!